All right, welcome. My name is Kevin Frank. Today is April 27th, and once again, we have Dr. Jeff Andresen, state climatologist with MSU, here to give us the weather update, which hopefully doesn't have snow in the forecast this week, Jeff.
Well, at least we have some mention of that here, but it's mostly in the past tense. But we are looking for another active week of weather. And as you mentioned, I had to add this today for northern parts of the state, especially. We had significant snowfall again yesterday. This image from the Traverse City Record Eagle in the Traverse City area, but uh, northern lower and several parts of the Upper Peninsula picked up well a couple of inches of wet, heavy snow yesterday. So late April is a long time in coming, but on the right hand side here, very very colorful image. These are temperatures here as of 8 o'clock this morning. And one of the, if it's a little difficult to see with the detail here, but it's a theme for our forecast unquestionably here over the next couple days. And what you can see across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region, lots of rapid changes in color and in temperature. And we still have temperatures in the low 30s in upper Michigan, very, very late winter, early spring like versus summer. But down at the very, very bottom here of the state of Michigan into southern Wisconsin, we've got a subtropical air mass, and it's moving north and east. It's in the upper 60s, as close as Chicago right now. If you looked at the map yesterday, and again yesterday for most of the state was another cool day. It wasn't as cold in the southern half of the state, but with a stiff southeast wind, it was a little raw out there. But if you looked at the weather map, right across the lake in the Chicagoland area, they reached the upper 70s for highs. That's the ear mass that's moving here again out of the subtropics. The big question is, how far north does it go? And right now it looks as though maybe halfway through the state before it stalls. But for at least for the southern part of the state, we're looking for a major change. And I'll talk about that in just a moment here. But for the past week, as we all know and appreciate, again, more late winter, early spring rather than early summer type, or at least late spring type of weather here. Mean temperatures for the week, 6 to 10 degrees below normal. So that's not a surprise. The big highlight here of the week, at least in terms of the meteorology and climatology, were the hard freezes on both Wednesday and Thursday morning of last week, the 21st and the 22nd. Temperatures across most of the state reached the mid 20s or lower. Most areas you can see, from the chart here, but most areas did reach the low to mid 20s, which is pretty cool for the date. Even cooler than that up in the far north, some teens in the western upper peninsula. And there was actually, the air was cold enough during this event to actually cause some lake effect cloudiness that kept temperatures from going, especially in the western part of lower Michigan, than they could have. So hard freeze condition there. It has caused some problems with some of our perennial crops. The fruit crops everything was advanced phenologically here, anything that came out of the winter, and so it was more vulnerable than it typically is at this time of the year. So that's still being assessed. But again, it was two hard freezes back to back in a row, and just a overall colder than normal week. Even with the colder than normal week and very little in the way of degree day accumulation, these are the current totals here as of yesterday. On the left-hand side, the deviation or our departure from normal is still strongly positive, but it's not as positive as it was in the last couple of weeks. Generally running about a week to maybe 2 weeks in some cases in the northern part of the state ahead of normal. But again, that's less advanced than we have been. So the cooler weather, at least it does average out over time. It just takes a while. A growing story, and perhaps maybe becoming the major story for many, is the lack of precipitation and the dryness. It was another drier than normal week, possibly with the exception of the extreme southern lower peninsula. These are weekly totals here, and for most of the state, less than a quarter of an inch. Again, far below what we should be seeing at this time of the year. The only exception here, there was some precipits, rain and snow up here in the upper peninsula, but then the weather system that moved through over the weekend, we did pick up over half an inch across the far southern lowland. That's actually one of the drier parts of the state. So that certainly was beneficial. It was a sort of a light, steady rain. So good quality in terms of efficiency of being absorbed. But look at large areas here, especially of central lower, where there was less than a tenth of an inch. And that tells the story. Again, long-term dryness. So a couple things here I wanted to point out regarding the dryness. And we'll start on the right-hand side here. There have been long-term precipitation deficits. This graphic goes back to the beginning of the new calendar year, so back to January 1, and it's accumulated precipitation that's given here in green. The brown is the normal. Well, this is for cold water. So in far south central lower Michigan, you can see that we've been running a deficit certainly over that time frame, something on the order now of about 4 inches below normal for the last roughly 4 months. It is important to note, though, the deficit actually, if you look at the winter and go back, it does go back to last fall. So for at least portions of the state, you can go back earlier than that and still see deficits. Deficits right now in the state in terms of where the largest tend to be across eastern and now some northern parts of lower Michigan, but eastern lower Michigan, southern lower Michigan, those are some of the driest areas. It turns out, though, it's not just about the amount of precip that we've observed. On the left-hand side here, EDDI stands for the Evaporative Drought Demand Index, or the EDDI index. It's something relatively new. And basically, this is used by the Drought Mitigation Center out in Lincoln, Nebraska, to follow things and look for development of flash droughts and other problems with dryness. But it is not about the precip. This is about the atmospheric demand. So it's looking at the potential evapotranspiration that could occur given the atmospheric conditions. So looking at the demand side, and what this thing, and interestingly, does suggest, this is the index you're looking at, a graphic here you're looking at is for the last 2 months. So basically for March and for April. And we could actually, you could go back 12 months and you'll see similar patterns here, but this is just for the last couple months. But you can see a large area here centered really southeastern lower Michigan or over Lake Erie, where this drought demand index is essentially about the highest it's ever been. Now this is all relative to a 30-year time frame, so long-term climatology. But what it does suggest is that the demand for water over the last couple months is up in the top percentile or couple percentile, if not the largest demand. Now, to temper that, we also have to remember that in March and April, certainly for all of the state, but certainly northern parts of the state, we don't typically see that much demand because the temperatures just aren't that high. The solar radiation is still relatively low. So it is a period, at least of the year, where we typically don't see as much demand as we do as we move into the warm season. But it's important to note that not only have we been dry, but the demand the demand this year has been high relative to normal. So I think as we look at the landscape right now and how dry it is, it's been a combination of both a lack of precip plus a higher than normal demand. And as a result of what we've seen recently, the U.S. Drought Monitor here really made some significant changes last week in its issuance. You can see for all of the lower peninsula now included in either D0, abnormally dry, or D1, moderate drought. And in the eastern upper peninsula, note that central and western lower Michigan, because they've picked up a lot of precipitation over the last few weeks, they now are basically at least out of either one. But for the index itself, while we did not change in the amount of area in Michigan versus the previous week, we're about 80% either in D0 or D1. The most, I think, interesting change, and it's not a good change, is that we increased the amount of D1 moderate drought by 40%. We moved from 17% to 57%. And you can see large areas now, certainly the northern half of lower Michigan, and then large areas here across the south that are in that D1 category. And of course, that's not something we want to see at any time of the year, but particularly now as we move into as temperatures edge up and our water demand also goes up. So something to keep in mind here, and a little bit of concern about this. But as we look at the outlook here, there are some changes I think that are probably going to help with this situation of dryness. Now, I'm going to start here with looking at the forecast with an upper air map because it's a really very, very illustrative uh, example of very high amplitude flow in the atmosphere. And if we look at down at North America, this is looking at a level right in the middle of the troposphere. And basically, you're looking at the steering currents of our weather systems that are on the future, the low pressure systems, high pressure systems, all those in the mid latitudes basically follow this, and the wind is parallel here to these height lines that you see plotted. The colors here depict areas that we have lower heights or lower pressure than normal, and then vice versa for the sort of the brown red color. And you can clearly see here we've got a big trough carved out over the western part of the US, the lower 48, and at the same time a big ridge has popped up over the east. And I'm sure most of you, well, you follow what we talk about here, but any of your on camera meteorologists and so forth, you look at this pattern and you typically correlate warmer than normal conditions on the surface with these ridges here, like in the eastern part of the US, and colder than normal underneath the troughs. And that's certainly the case here. One other thing to note too is that we still have the jet stream split into two pieces. There's still a northern branch up here, mostly in Canada, and then we have a southern or subtropical branch. We've seen that, boy, all the way back into the wintertime. It's been a continuing pattern. That's a little unusual to have it persist that long. And the reason I bring it up is because it makes some of the forecasting, there's less confidence. It's harder to predict with more accuracy with this kind of pattern, and we've seen this a lot. But in general, as we look at the outlook ahead, the forecast is generally for a de-amplification of this pattern to a more west to east. And I'll show you really the medium range here in just a little bit. But as long as you've got that split flow, as I say, there's a little bit less confidence because the forecast models that look out into the future, it's a difficult or more difficult, relatively speaking, to forecast this with as much accuracy. But a couple things now for us with the ridge popping up right over us. We're going to see our temperatures. Well, I mentioned at the beginning, you saw there's subtropical air at our doorstep, and it's moving northward. And this is one of the reasons why. The other thing that's important to note with this feature, this upper air, is that if we looked at winds on the surface here, they're right out of the south and southwest. The Gulf of Mexico is wide open for business. Where's the raw material for precipitation come from? Well, a big chunk of it comes from the Gulf of Mexico. Water's on the way. The raw material for precip is on the way. And that's another part of our outlook here again for the next couple days. So this morning we look at the weather map. Here is the leading edge of that subtropical air mass. It's currently now, as of noon today, it's up into about the 3 southwesternmost counties in lower Michigan, and it's advancing north and eastward. Along, again, this warm front is the leading edge of it. And there's about a 10-degree jump fairly quickly as this front goes through, and it will go through across all of southern lower Michigan and most of central lower Michigan here during the day-to-day. You'll see your winds shift around from the east and southeast. They'll shift around to the south and southwest, plus that increase in temperature. And we will see high temperatures today. It's hard to believe given where we've been, but we will be 80 across the far southern lower, and then 70s well up into central lower Michigan behind this air mass. Now on the other side, the northern side of this, a completely different story with still with easterly winds, chilly conditions, not as bad as yesterday, but still way, way below. We'll only be in the far north and 50s, maybe in the northern lower. So one of the questions is, well, how far does this warm air get? And right now, I'm guessing somewhere about M72 or so is about as far north as it makes it. The other thing about the frontal boundary, it's going to serve as a focus for, I think, 2 major rounds of precipitation chances. The first one is tonight, late tonight into tomorrow morning. And it looks primarily like that will be across, the best chances for precip tonight will be across northern lower Michigan and eastern upper Michigan, which of course has been an area that has been drier than normal. There will be some showers and thunder showers across the southern part of the state, but I think there'll be quite a bit more on the scattered variety. So not everybody will see precip, but some people will. Best chances again with the first impulse along this frontal boundary tonight into tomorrow. After that, we will see another main area of low pressure, and that's out here. Here's the weather map for 8 p.m. this evening, and you can see all the green color here, basically just showing or illustrating what we just talked about. But there will be a second area of low pressure right up to the north and east along this frontal boundary, mostly overnight Wednesday into Thursday. And for the rest of the state, especially the southern part of the state, this will be the best chance for rainfall. So 2 major episodes, although there will be a continuing chance basically from later today all the way into Thursday across much of the state, especially across lower Michigan. Here's the map as of 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You can see the front basically is stalled across northern lower. Very cool, abnormally, well, bleak to the north, and then still warmer. Now, temperatures also, because of clouds, tomorrow will be about 5 to 10 degrees less. So we won't see 80 degrees again tomorrow, but we'll still make it above 70 probably. And then a couple degrees cooler than that on Thursday, because ultimately we've got another Canadian origin area of high pressure that will move in overnight Thursday and Friday. And so after all the precipitation comes to an end, the threat by late on Thursday, and then we move into a significantly cooler and drier pattern, fair skies here for Friday and Saturday, and probably most of Sunday as well. Although there will be moderating temperatures once again by the time we get to the late in the weekend. Here's the map for Thursday morning. Now note, I mentioned the best chance for precip across the southern part of the state. This is still a little bit up in the air. And right now, most of the guidance is suggesting that the majority of the water and the precipitation that's on its way upward from or northward from the Gulf of Mexico, it will fall in areas south over the Ohio Valley, the lower Mississippi Valley. But there's still, we still may get into some of this heavier rain, and I'll show you here next. These are forecast precipitation totals. Note here that over large portions of the Ohio Valley, we're talking 2, 3, or more inches. So heavy rain is expected somewhere with this particular system. Right now, the best guess is it remains south of us, but even so, it will be significant rainfall or precipitation for Michigan, and given the dryness, of course, that's a good thing. Overall, for most of the state, a half to about 1 inch is what the potential is looking at right now. I'd like to see a little bit better aerial coverage than we see, so I think there'll probably be quite a bit of variability from place to place. But 2 good chances with this, and hopefully everybody should pick up a half an inch or better. That should help before it gets dry. Once again, as I mentioned, Canadian air moving back in back of the system here for late in the week. That will set the stage. We could see in northern parts of the state and a little bit of frost on Friday morning, but the coldest morning with this next air mass will likely be on Saturday morning. It'll be a traditional radiation type of event with relatively clear, calm conditions overnight, and that will allow temperatures to go back down into the low mid 30s. But not looking at this point in time, not looking anything like what we saw last week. Again, low to mid 30s in most spots, and so probably some frost on the surface, but not in most areas. Certainly across, and especially across the central and south, not looking at a hard freeze, just something marginal. But thought I'd throw it in here because we have dealt with a lot of that here recently. In the medium range time frame, on the left-hand side here, thinking about what we talked about with the jet stream node, we have lost some of those big ridges or high amplitude ridges and troughs that we have right now. More of a west-east, although it is still technically a split flow pattern, especially over Western North America. But given that, one would have to go with normal to above normal mean temperatures in terms of a forecast. Both the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day are fairly consistent with this. This is for the 2nd through the 6th. So that first week of May, it's looking milder than normal. But I say that I just saw a forecast product from one of the models. It's actually the U.S. Medium range forecast models, and it hints at possibly another trough that the other models are not picking up that might be here in early May. And if that happened, this forecast would be going down in flames. But we'll see. It's a tough thing to do and to get consensus among all the models here. But the majority of these models do suggest milder than normal temperatures. They also forecast or suggest a relatively active storm track. And so after Well, after tomorrow and into Thursday, the next chance for precipitation probably coming early next week, and that might be also a significant chance. But given more chances for precipitation and a fairly active storm track, the medium range also calls for normal to above normal precip totals, and that again, that probably is a positive here given where we have been. So summarizing, we've covered a lot here. Pretty unsettled type of couple days here, but huge differences between north and south in the state with early summer conditions in the south and well, again, early spring conditions in the far north, but hopefully some precip for everybody over the next couple days here. And temperatures ultimately after the warm up for the next 2 days, then cooling back down Thursday or Friday and Saturday. We should be back up to 70 for a high temperature by Sunday and Monday of next week. So that milder than normal conditions or the forecast that you saw, that's probably when that starts to in earnest. And ultimately, most of the medium range and long range is still calling for warmer than normal mean temperatures as well. And I'll stop there and see if any questions or comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. I think the precip definitely sounds promising, even though it might not be. It's not going to catch us up immediately, but it is dry out there, and I've noticed that just even digging in my own lawn a little bit that you got below the surface and it's bone dry, and I think we haven't seen the effects of that yet. I mean, golf courses certainly have their irrigation systems already on, but a lot of homeowners that would irrigate don't have their systems on yet, and they've probably gotten away with it to some degree just because it's been cool.
Right, and it is, as you said, it is very unusual in Michigan. We have a humid climate, and typically our soil moisture relative to its capacity, depending on the texture, et cetera, we do not see very rarely see dry profiles like we do now, and it's a reflection again of what we talked about earlier. But it's unusual. The good news is that we are moving into, of course, the wetter time. The warm season is when we get most of our precipitation. So it's not as dire as if we were 2 months later and then moving into the middle of the warmest part of the growing season when the demand is highest. That's what we don't want. But we do need, I think I guess the point remains, we need some recovery between now and in late June or early July, or there will be problems.
Yeah, it could be setting up for a tough summer. So let's hope we get back on track. So thanks very much, Jeff, and nice to see some warm temps, and hopefully everybody can enjoy it a little bit before it cools off again. So thank you, Jeff.
You bet. See you next week.